subscribe. It's your girl Michelle here. Today I am super excited. I'm going to be joining the land of book tags. Very excited to be doing this today. In case you can't figure it out from the title, this book tag is called the Friday the 13th franchise book tag. Now, I was actually tagged by Merce from Harpies in the Trees. I will link her down below. Definitely go check out her channel. Her channel is amazing. And her aesthetic is to die for. So just go check her out. Nothing but gratitude towards her. Thank you so much, Merce, for tagging me in this. It was actually kind of difficult. This one was a little tough. Some of the questions on this book tag, I really just didn't have books that kind of meshed with that, but I'm hoping that I give some alternatives that I don't actually own to you guys, so we'll just go from there. Now, originally this book tag was created by Paperback Junkie. I'm going to list them down in the description below as well, just so you can go check out where this tag originated from. So there's basically 13 questions, and we're going to be trying to find a book that fits into all of them, into these 13 categories. So let's just jump right into this, shall we? So the first question or category or whatever you want to call it is basically asking for a book where the mother is the villain. So some kind of book where the mother character is the villain or turns out to be the villain. Ironically enough, I don't really have a book that just springs to mind where the mother is the villain, but I did read one book that's based off of a real life case that I covered in the video I did about the Exorcist franchise, and that is this book, which is called Confrontation with Evil by Stephen A. LaChance. So that's this lovely number here. So as you can tell, it says an in-depth review of the 1949 possession that inspired The Exorcist. So this is Mr. LaChance's account and like historical research. I don't know why that word was so hard to come up with. This is basically Mr. LaChance's combination of like his own personal experiences that have to do with that case, while also kind of delving into the history behind the real life case that inspired The Exorcist. So if you dive into this book, it's pretty obvious from the get-go that Mr. LaChance is of the opinion that the mother of the real life boy, who is referred to as Roland Doe in the case, has more to do with the possession and the incidents that occur within the home and with Roland than at first meets the eye. So, you know, a lot of people are so quick to be like, oh, the family, you know, this just happened to them, they're victims too. But Mr. LaChance does kind of point out that the mother, along with some of the other family members, tended to look at what was happening to Roland almost like a party trick, and they would actually use some of the very painful things that were happening to his body. They would actually use that to communicate with this entity, and they actually kind of pushed what was going on a little farther than maybe it should have gone. So while Mr. LaChance doesn't outright say the mom is the villain, it's the mom's fault that, you know, Roland got possessed, it's nothing that bad, but it does kind of paint the mother figure in a more negative light. So this is the one book I have that kind of fits in that category, but she's not the villain per se. The next category is basically to find a book that takes place in the backwoods. As you guys know, there was only one book recently that I've read that kind of fits into that category, and that would be The Ritual by Adam Neville. I just finished this book a few weeks ago and I absolutely loved it. I will be doing a more in-depth review of this book coming up soon, so I'm not going to go into super detail about what it's about. If you haven't already, check out the Netflix film adaptation, because that was really good as well, even though it doesn't quite mesh up with the book in some sense. But the film is really good on Netflix. The book is amazing. So, I mean, and it definitely takes place in the woods. It's hard for me to imagine a book that is more in the woods. So, yeah, here we go. The third category is basically to find a book with a masked character. Now, this next book I'm going to bring out, I don't know if he's actually masked in the book per se, but you'll know immediately why I chose this book, and that is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Is it Leroux or Leroux? I don't really remember. This is actually a very short little read. It's somewhat difficult. The language is pretty old. I would kind of classify this in Gothic literature, so it can be pretty dry at points. I'm just warning you now. But I honestly have not read this book in a hot minute. Like, it has been a while, and I can't remember if the Phantom as a character is actually masked in the book. I know in the Broadway musical adaptation he is. I know in the movies he is, but I think there's only like vague recollections about a mask in the book. I really don't think he wears an actual mask all the time in the book, but I could be wrong. So I will be rereading this book at some point. I loved it because I love everything to do with the Phantom of the Opera, but there you go. This is really the only one I have that even remotely fits. The next category was ridiculously hard. It's basically finding a book with the best final chapter. And I'm gonna get like some weird looks, I think, because of all the authors in the world, this is probably not an author who usually has the best final chapter. We're gonna go with It by Stephen King. Now, some of the reason why I'm choosing It by Stephen King is because I did just finish this book recently, so it is kind of fresh in my mind. But believe it or not, this is one of the Stephen King books that actually has a really good, wholesome ending. You know, there's nothing about the way that this book ends that just kind of, you know, leaves you in a deep, dark place. Now, don't get me wrong, you are going to feel a little bit of what I call like just melancholy, maybe nostalgia. I don't know. You feel a little down at the end just because you've gone through so much with these characters. But the way this book ends, the final chapter in particular, always stood out to me just because it's a beautiful little wrap up. You know, it's just kind of showcasing that these people will always like love each other and have this history, even though ultimately they may end up forgetting about it later. So it's a lot, but I really did enjoy the final chapter and the way that this book ends. So there's that. So the next category, I believe we're on category 5, is basically to find a book. It's basically to find a series book where the protagonist changes. So meaning that it changes throughout the series, I'm assuming, and not necessarily in the same book. I was kind of confused on that. So I mean, I have one series in mind where there is a different protagonist in every single book within the series, and that's going to be our Dark series by Christine Feehan. Now, I am on a slow recollection phase of this series because this is probably the only series of paranormal romance that I have ever wholeheartedly loved, enjoyed, and wanted to have the entire collection. I have not made it through the entire series. I think originally I had up to, I want to say up to the 10th book or so in the series. I ended up regifting them all because I was going through a time in my life where I just couldn't have very many books or very many, like anything in my apartment. So I regifted them to a friend, and now that I have more space, I am on a very slow journey of kind of recollecting this series, and just, you know, obviously used paperbacks is fine with me. But this series is wonderful. If you like paranormal romance, I encourage you to check this series out if you haven't already. Literally each book has a different focus, like a different protagonist in each story. So the one thing that I always loved about this series is that, you know, you do have your own standalone stories in each book. Because originally I actually picked up the 3rd book in this series and was able to read all the way through it, and I had no idea that I was even in a series until like by the end of the book. So this series is really good. You can kind of pick your way through it. You don't necessarily have to go in order, but I have noticed that there are little like Easter eggs, like little moments in each book that kind of sort of talk about the previous books in the series. So there is that, but a lot of these are just standalone stories in and of themselves. So yeah, check that out. Now the 6th category is basically to find a book where someone or something has been resurrected from the dead. Now, unfortunately, Mer's already said Frankenstein in her list. I am gonna say it again just because it is my absolute favorite horror novel ever, like ever. So of course, I mean, the go-to would be Frankenstein. But another one to think about would be Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I actually don't have a copy of Pet Sematary, and I've never actually read it. So that is on my list to buy and to read, obviously. But it's gonna have to wait its turn because there's a lot of books ahead of it. But yeah, definitely Frankenstein is my all-time favorite when it comes to that particular category. Now the 7th category is a book that has a character with telekinesis. Now, I actually could not think of a book that I myself have personally read where the main character, or really any of the characters, had telekinesis. I sat and I thought about it really hard, and I've really never read a book like that personally, although I do believe that Carrie and Firestarter both have telekinesis. So those might be a couple of options that you can check out. I myself have never read either of them though, so y'all are gonna have to let me know if they're worth the read. Now, category 8 is a book that takes place in New York. I could not actually find any fictional books of mine that took place in New York, but as you all know, I am absolutely obsessed with demonology and the paranormal. So if you've ever heard me rant and rave about this book, don't be surprised that it's on the list, and that is Deliver Us from Evil by Ralph Sarchie. And Lisa Collier-Cool, I believe, is the lady who helped him write this book. So Deliver Us from Evil is kind of like a non-fiction book showcasing the many different cases that Ralph Sarchie has taken part in over the years. Now, Ralph Sarchie was a 16-year veteran of the NYPD, and a lot of the cases showcased in this book took place directly in New York. Whether or not he was looking at these cases from a police officer perspective or from his paranormal research perspective, most if not all of these cases took place in and around New York. So if you are interested in demonology, if you're interested in demonic possession or the paranormal in general, this is a really interesting read, and pretty much each chapter is a different case. He actually did work alongside Ed and Lorraine Warren for a short period, so they are mentioned here and there as well. And I just really liked the read. Now, this was actually a film adaptation as well. Obviously, the film is complete fiction, and Hollywood took its license with that and ran with it. But I will say that the movie is very good. It's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, demonic possession movies of all time. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check it out. Now, the 9th category is basically to find a book that takes place in hell or has something to do with the occult. And this is a book I actually have not read yet. It's a book that's been sitting on my shelf for years, and I keep meaning to read it, and I'll get a little bit into it and then I'll just fail again because it's kind of a tough read for me anyway. And that would be Paradise Lost by John Milton. Now, this obviously is a very classic book. It's almost written in kind of a poetic style. I think that was the point ultimately. So yeah, this book has scenes that take place in hell, in heaven, and everywhere in between, I believe. There's definitely a lot of perspectives from like Satan and demons in this book. So this is just the perfect one I could think of. So yeah, still haven't read it, but it's on my to-read list. Now, the 10th category is a book that takes place in space, and honestly, I fail at this category ultimately. I don't normally like sci-fi horror. I'm not a huge fan of alien stories, but I have seen or I have heard of books that are a beautiful like combination of like aliens and horror. So if you guys have any recommendations for me in that area, go ahead and put those down in the comment section below, because I'm really just not very well versed, I guess. I don't know a lot about sci-fi horror. So if you guys have any or some people will refer to it as cosmic horror. So if any of you guys have some book recommendations that you think I would be interested in that category, go ahead and put it down below for me. Now, category 11 is asking for a book that has, I believe it's characters? Yeah, characters from different franchises. I honestly couldn't find any books that had like complete characters that were from different franchises, but this book I'm about to showcase actually makes mention of a lot of different franchises inside of it, and that would be My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So again, I just read this book recently. There's a lot of there's a lot of talk about E.T. There's some references to The Exorcist. I believe there's some references to other horror movies in here too. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but there were a lot of references to like different movie franchises and yada yada yada. So I thought I would just kind of mention it in this category, even though it doesn't have any blatant like actual characters in the story that are from those franchises. It at least mentions them. So now category 12 is asking for a book that is basically a retelling of a story. Now, I did just get a couple of books that are supposedly like these weird retellings of like Red Riding Hood and other folklore, but because I haven't really read through them yet, I didn't feel comfortable listing them just because I don't want to tell you guys wrong, you know, because I haven't actually read them. But one book that I have read that I wanted to kind of interject into this category, even though it's not an exact retelling, was The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your last name. So I read this book a long time ago. It is very long. It is basically all about Dracula, and we're talking the mythological Dracula as well as the real life Dracula. This book I found to be so interesting, even though it does get painfully dry at times because it is very scholarly. Just the way it's written is very scholarly. There's a lot of factual things included in this book, but most of the facts are used to kind of back up the mythos surrounding Dracula. So it touches on, you know, certain things about the original Dracula story from Bram Stoker, while also adding this whole layer of, you know, historical facts to basically try to bring that story fully into the real world, if that makes any sense. But anyway, this is a great book. It is a very long read. It is very scholarly and dry at times, but I definitely encourage you, if you love Dracula, you'll love this one. Promise you. Maybe I shouldn't promise, but I think you will. Let's say that. And last but not least, we have category 13, which is basically a book that you found in a thrift store or antique shop. Now, the one I most recently found is called Prime Evil by Judith Kelman. I have not read this book yet, so I mean, I don't really know a whole lot about it. The little synopsis doesn't really give you much to go on, but it does sound somewhat like your haunted house trope. So I'm hoping that it has, you know, a little bit of haunted house goodies, maybe even a little bit of demonic possession thrown in. Yeah. But either way, this is one of the most recent finds that I have purchased from a thrift store. And I believe it was only like maybe $1, if not less. So it's pretty cool. So there we have it, you guys. I did my best. This is my first book tag ever, so please, you know, excuse the jitters. I just got so excited that I was actually tagged in one. So yeah, there's that. Once again, I want to say a huge thank you to Merce from Harpies in the Trees. That meant so much to me to just be kind of included in this. I want to say thank you to Paperback Junkie for even creating this book tag, because it's a really unique one. I haven't really seen one like this so far anyway, and it was really hard. So for the categories that I didn't have any books listed or any books that fit perfectly into it, if you guys have any recommendations, please list them down in the comment sections below. We're kind of getting a little bit close to 300 subscribers. We have about like, what, 50 or so subscribers left. We're like midway there. So if I get to if I get to 300 subscribers soon, I am going to do a giveaway, but I will let you know that I'll probably be doing a giveaway over on my Instagram page. So if you haven't already followed me on Instagram, I will link that down below as well, so you can go do that. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it, you guys. We did the book tag. I just watched The Conjuring 3 today as well, so I'll probably be including that in my next little movie reviews, because I have been watching a lot of horror streaming and I did finally get to stream The Conjuring 3 on HBO Max today, so I'll let you guys know my thoughts on it. It was definitely a lot. It was definitely a lot. But anyways, I love you guys. I hope you are all safe and doing well in life. And like I said, if you haven't already, like the video, comment down below, and subscribe, of course. We need you. We need you. So yeah. Other than that, have a great evening or morning or whenever you're watching this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.